Tête-à-tête avec un artiste.
So thank you very much for coming. I'm delighted to welcome Barrie Kosky for this Tête-à-Tête devoted to Songs and Fragments, one of the two productions we are hosting at the Jeux de Paume this year. Donc bonsoir à toutes et à tous, je suis vraiment ravie de vous voir si nombreux ce soir. Donc nous sommes en compagnie de Barrie Kosky, qui est metteur en scène et qui s'occupe de Songs and Fragments, qui est l'une des deux productions qui se tiendra au Jeux de Paume cet été. Donc cet entretien sera en anglais, je ferai la navette, j'espère que ce ne sera pas trop laborieux. Mais voilà, normalement, tout devrait être accessible. So, Barrie Kosky, you are one of the stage, you are the stage director of this production with a diptych. So it's made of 8 songs for Matt King and the Kafka Fragmente. The first one is composed by Peter Maxwell Davies and the second by Kurtag from Excerpts written by Kafka. Donc, 8 songs for Matt King, c'est la première partie du diptyque. C'est une pièce qui est composée par Peter Maxwell Davies, et la deuxième partie du diptyque, donc les deux se suivent, ne sont pas forcément faites pour se succéder, mais là c'est le projet, c'est un des deux diptyques du Festival d'Aix cette année. La deuxième partie du diptyque est composée des Kafka Fragmente, composés par Kurtag avec des extraits qui viennent directement de Kafka. And the Kafka Fragmente are interpreted by Anna Prohaska and Patricia Kopaczynskaya. And in 8 songs, it's Martin Krenzle, who is accompanied by the Ensemble Intercontemporain, conducted by Pierre Bleuze. Donc pour le premier, on a Patricia Kopaczynskaya au violon et Anna Prohaska. Et pour 8 songs, c'est Martin Krenzle et l'Ensemble Intercontemporain qui est dirigé par Pierre Bleuze. Perhaps to begin with, can you tell us more about the genesis of this production? How did the idea come to you to show these two works, these two specific works, and why in this order? Maybe in French. Comment est-ce que, peut-être commencer par la genèse, comment est-ce que vous êtes venu avec cette idée de faire jouer ces œuvres qui sont, comme je l'ai dit tout à l'heure, pas forcément faites pour se succéder, et pourquoi dans cet ordre?
Firstly, bonsoir. Very nice to be here. So the project came about in a very unusual way. Pas normal. Pierre Audi, the director of the festival, asked me to think of doing a very small production this year because I will come back in a few years to do a very big production. And I said, no, I can't come this year. I'm having a very long holiday and I'm very tired and I'm not coming. And I love Aix, but I'm not coming and I'm exhausted and I'm going on a 10-week holiday. This was 2 years ago.
Oui, peut-être du coup pour traduire rapidement, c'est un choix qui s'est fait de manière un peu inhabituelle. Pierre Audi avait proposé à Barrie Kosky de revenir à Aix pour une production qu'il envisageait plus grande. Et la réponse de Barrie Kosky était de dire non, je prends des vacances, je n'ai pas envie de me lancer dans un gros projet cette année. Je pense plutôt à quelque chose, à des dimensions plus réduites, mais pour une grosse direction d'opéra, ça ne va pas être possible pour cette fois-là. Et c'était il y a 2 ans, une conversation il y a 2 ans.
But if you know Pierre, it's very hard for Pierre to accept no. And it's also very hard for me to say no when Pierre looks into my eyes in his Lebanese melancholia and asks me, please, please, please. So I did. I said, okay, let's find a very small project. And I'd already known Martin Krenzle, the German singer, for a long time now. We've done 5 productions together, and he was Beckmesser in my Meistersinger production in Bayreuth. And I adore him, as most directors do, because he's an extraordinary singing actor. And he'd always said to me that one of his favorite pieces was 8 songs from Mad King, which he had sung, well, not sung, screamed, I think is the right word for the show piece, when he was 25, a student in Hanover. And he said he's never had the opportunity to do it again. So I said to Pierre, well, maybe we do that as a starting point. And then we needed a second piece because the 8 songs from Mad King is only 30 minutes. It's with 6 musicians and 1 performer. And we both had the same idea, Pierre and I, when we both thought what piece would go. We both only thought of one piece, and this was the Kafka Fragments by Kurtag, because we both love it, and then we both thought of Anna Prohaska and Patricia at the same time. So it was a production that was obviously, the theatre gods had decided this production must happen, because it fell very easily into place, and everyone was available, and we rehearsed in a very concentrated 3-week period, because the production is only an hour and a half, and it's been a wonderful experience.
Okay, thank you. Donc, comme Barrie Kosky et Pierre Audy sont tous les deux assez têtus et n'arrivent pas à dire non quand il s'agit d'un projet à monter ensemble, voilà, l'idée est venue de faire une production un peu plus réduite. Le point de départ, c'était les 8 songs. Barrie Kosky avait en tête de les interpréter avec Martin Krenzle, avec lequel il a l'habitude de beaucoup travailler. Il a notamment été Beckmesser dans les maîtres chanteurs de Nuremberg à Bayreuth. Donc voilà, le point de départ, c'était les 8 songs, et voilà, c'est une œuvre qui est assez courte, qui dure que 40 minutes, donc il fallait trouver quelque chose d'autre pour compléter le diptyque. Tous les deux ont en fait eu, après quelques jours, la même idée au même moment. Ça serait les Kafka Fragments de Kurtag, et tous les deux se sont dit c'est avec Anna Prohaska et Patricia Kopaczynskaja qu'il faut faire cette œuvre-là. Et j'essaie de me souvenir de la suite. Et c'était un travail très, très concentré, une résidence très concentrée. Le travail a commencé il y a 3 semaines. Et voilà, tout s'est fait pendant ces 3 semaines.
And this happens, I think, often in theatre. If you just throw an idea up into the air and then you let it fall down, in a lot of cases, in fact, in my experience, in most cases, something will happen with this. And so we thought that the 2 pieces would work very well. What we did not know is how well they would work, because they are 2 very different musical and music dramaturgical pieces, very different in terms of what Peter Maxwell Davies does and what Kurtag does. The subject matter is very different, but there are a number of echoes and threads between the 2 productions which the audience can make up their own mind what it means, that works very well. But it's an amazingly complementary duet, which I never thought would be so good to hear the 2 pieces together.
Okay, thank you. C'était en quelque sorte une sorte de révélation d'avoir ces 2 œuvres. C'était pas juste une juxtaposition. En fait, il y a beaucoup de liens, de connexions qui se sont révélées dans le travail entre ces 2 œuvres. Bien que ces 2 œuvres ne soient... c'est vraiment 2 œuvres qui ont une identité bien particulière à chaque fois. Elles sont complémentaires, elles se prolongent l'une l'autre, mais on a quand même deux choses vraiment, vraiment différentes. And we will explore the connections between the 2 works a little bit later. Maybe one more question about your work with Anna Prohaska and Martin Krenzle. So you did work with...
So I know Anna, we both live in Berlin, and Anna was with the ensemble of the Berlin Staatsoper, and I was running the Komische Oper, and we'd known each other for nearly 20 years. And every single premiere of hers or mine, we would say, when are we going to work? And there was one time I think we wanted her to come to the Komische Oper, but Daniel Barenboim wouldn't let her go. And then now she's left the ensemble there. And we just never found the right project. And so she was so I said, when we finally get to work with each other, you're doing a solo show. So she had all my attention. She was very happy.
Ok. Donc effectivement, Barrie Kosky a travaillé avec Martin Krenzle par le passé, mais n'avait encore jamais eu la chance de travailler avec Anna Prohaska. Ça fait 20 ans qu'ils se connaissent, 20 ans qu'ils assistent mutuellement aux premières de leurs productions respectives en se disant mais quand est-ce qu'on va pouvoir travailler ensemble, et que voilà, pris par leurs engagements respectifs, ça ne pouvait pas advenir. Donc là, c'est l'occasion de lancer un premier travail avec Anna Prohaska, dans en plus une production qui la met au premier plan, puisqu'il n'y a que Anna et Patricia Kopaczynskaja dans les Kafka Fragmente.
And also I have to say Anna is one of these very exceptional artists. She has done a lot of Baroque music, Rameau, Handel, Bach, Lully, Monteverdi, and she has done a lot of contemporary music. So she has the technique of contemporary music with the clarity and beauty of Baroque music in her voice, which is a very good combination for a piece like the Fragments.
Et Anna a vraiment un panel technique et expressif assez incroyable, puisqu'elle chante autant de la musique baroque que de la musique contemporaine. Donc elle a la lumière et l'expressivité de la musique baroque, elle a la précision, la minutie de la musique contemporaine. Évidemment, la combinaison des deux dans les Kafka Fragmente est assez incroyable à explorer. And you are back in Aix a few years after singing, not singing, staging the Golden Cockerel. So, are there any links for you between this? And Falstaff, but the links are maybe more obvious between the Golden Cockerel.
No,
I'm thinking. About
only Beatrice from the festival pointed out the other day that Martin, who he has this bird quality, that this must have been a very clever dramaturgical link between the Le Coq d'Or production and this new production, and I never thought about it before, so okay. I'll say yes, of course.
Okay.
It's very, very no, it's actually there's nothing. That's pure accident. It was very. I had to do Falstaff and Le Coq d'Or in the same festival, which was very hard because we'd had to rehearse Le Coq d'Or before, and then in Lyon, and then Falstaff. He originally was meant to be over two festivals, it's nice to come and do something very different from those two productions.
Ok, merci. Donc la question était de voilà, savoir si Barrie Kosky voyait des liens avec Le Coq d'Or qu'il avait monté à Aix il y a quelques années. Alors il a aussi monté Falstaff. Et la réponse est non. Alors voilà, vous allez peut-être le remarquer si vous assistez à Songs and Fragments. Il y a un détail dans les costumes en fait et des ongles ou des griffes d'oiseaux qui sont donc utilisés pour les 8 songs, qui étaient repris aussi, enfin qui sont repris en fait du Coq d'Or. Donc voilà, la question était est-ce qu'il y a un lien entre les deux œuvres, évidemment un lien dramaturgique au niveau des costumes, aussi un lien peut-être un peu plus profond qui travaille les deux œuvres. Dans 8 songs, la présence des oiseaux est très importante. Si vous ne connaissez pas l'œuvre, il y a vraiment un dialogue. Le roi en question voulait apprendre à chanter à ses oiseaux. Il y a un mimétisme entre les deux. Les oiseaux sont vraiment importants dans la pièce, d'où la question sur le lien. Et ce lien n'a pas été pensé comme tel, mais peut nourrir quand même d'autres imaginaires. So Martin Krenzel did sing 8 songs previously, but that was 30 years ago, I think. So his relationship with his score was necessarily different.
Yes, he was singing it in German 30 years ago, and it was semi-staged, so he had never been in a rehearsal room to actually really see how the piece could be transformed. And the thing about the piece is, I think the 8 songs is one of the most extraordinary pieces of music theatre written after the war. But it's very hard to do. And most of the time it's done by male singer who is not really an opera singer. He may do a lot of contemporary music because if you don't know this piece, it's a monologue by George III, the King of England, who was mad. And we hear the king sing 8 songs to different people, sometimes to his wife, sometimes to the birds. And most of the text you hear is drawn from witness accounts of what the king said from his doctors and from the servants in the palace. And it's an amazing text. And he had, I mean, he was obviously schizophrenic and he was seriously ill. And he obviously had Tourette's syndrome because he wouldn't stop talking. So, as he says in the piece, they couldn't shave him, which is true, because his mouth wouldn't stop moving and he wouldn't sleep. So he was an insomniac who literally could not stop talking. And Peter Maxwell Davies then took these things and wrote this piece for this singer using Peter Maxwell Davies's music landscape, but Handel and jazz, honky-tonk. It's an extraordinary score. And what he asks of the singer is what no opera singer ever wants to be asked to do, which is to scream, grunt, falsetto, things that basically will ruin your voice if you want a career. And so it's not usually sung by opera singers. And so Martin has an amazing technique, and he knows exactly what to do with his voice. And he was meant to sing just before we started rehearsals, Francis of Assisi, the Messiaen in Hamburg, which was a project he was meant to do before the pandemic. And he cancelled it, also because they were doing a production he hadn't learned. He said, I can't sing this score from memory. So he said he couldn't do any other pieces. So you need to have the time to actually do it, because even though it's 30 minutes, the demands it makes on a voice or the larynx of the singer is spectacular. And yeah, you have to have either no career or a great technique to actually sing it.
Eight Songs, c'est une œuvre qui est très exigeante sur le plan vocal, on va dire ça comme ça, et qui impose de ne pas avoir vraiment d'engagement à côté, parce que c'est quelque chose qui... Enfin, voilà, on peut pas faire deux projets en parallèle, ça détruit, on va dire, trop la voix. Alors là, le fait est que Martin sait précisément quoi faire pour éviter de détruire sa voix. Mais voilà, de fait, c'est une œuvre très courte qui néanmoins implique un engagement tel qu'il n'y a que cette œuvre pendant la durée de la production. Maybe a few words about his costume, which is... quite minimalist.
Well, it's a pair of underpants.
Yeah.
There's no costume.
And the asymmetry, maybe between the...
Well, I mean, I have to say to you, one of the reasons why this project took place was I was asked not to have any set or costumes. And I said, okay, I've done many productions with nothing. In fact, I think it's very healthy for directors. It's like a detox. It's very important and healthy for a director to be told you have nothing for a production. We have usually we have everything given to us, very expensive budgets for costumes and set, and we use them and it's fantastic, but essentially this is not really what it's all about. If we really think about it, I think you should be able to stage any opera ever written on a bare stage with nothing, I believe. And I tell young directors, if you can't do that, whether it's Figaro or Tristan or Eight Songs, if you can't do that, maybe you should think of another profession. Because I think that the essential ritual of music theatre is voice and body. Because that's what the ancient Greeks discovered. And that's what opera comes from. Any of our music theatre is descended from the theatre of Aeschylus and Euripides. And this was a bare stage with one performer on it, or three at the most, or a chorus. But essentially that's it. And so, in a way, it's not right to say there's nothing on the stage, because there's a performer, which is everything. So there's the paradox.
Thank you. Donc la question portait sur les costumes dans Eight Songs, qui sont pour le moins minimalistes, puisque l'homme qui est sur la scène est uniquement vêtu d'un caleçon. Alors il y a quelques éléments aussi de maquillage asymétrique qui étaient les clins d'œil au coq d'or dont je parlais tout à l'heure. Et pour Barrie Kosky, en fait, l'idée c'était de revenir à une certaine détox, si on peut dire, dans cette œuvre, mais qui est inhérente au projet lui-même, mais qui finalement répond aussi à un caractère viscéral de la mise en scène. En fait, pour Barrie Kosky, on devrait pouvoir être capable de monter n'importe quel opéra sans rien d'autre, paradoxalement, sans rien d'autre que la voix, que la puissance viscérale du corps qui est sur scène. Et quelque part, c'est revenir aux origines de l'opéra, du drame grec, du théâtre antique, qui n'était porté que par la voix, par la musique, par cette puissance expressive qui se dégage et qui, quelque part, peut permettre de se détacher du reste. Thank you for these elements about 8 songs. Maybe a few words, but you can just drink and follow with the Kafka Fragmente. Anna and Patricia had already played this score, so they weren't starting from scratch, and it's maybe a different approach than with Martin. So how did you begin your collaboration, and on what basis, considering they already had a great experience?
So once again, I'd just like to tell the audience a little bit about the piece in case they don't know. So the Peter Maxwell Davies is a piece called 8 Songs, which has 8 songs, which the king sings. The Kafka Fragments is actually a song cycle. It's not a theatre piece. It's a song cycle, and like the title says to us, it's made of fragments. It's 40 fragments of Kafka texts set to music by Kurtag for just a violinist and a soprano. And it's a very interesting thing for a number of reasons. So the text that we hear comes from Kafka's diaries and his letters. As you know, he wrote extraordinary diaries and letters. And so it's a male voice. And it's very unusual for someone, a composer or someone, to take Kafka and put Kafka with a female voice. That's the first interesting thing. The second thing is there's no story, there's no narrative, there's in fact no character. It's a song cycle. And some of the songs last for 25 seconds. The longest one I think is 6.5. And what we hear in this piece is an extraordinary sound world of Kurtag married with these ironic, emotional, existential texts from Kafka. And it's like 40 postcards from a woman. She sent 40 postcards to someone. It's like you scribble on a postcard, having a great time in Aix-en-Provence, love Franz Kafka. It's more complicated than that. And then these postcards, you lay them on the table, and they, of course, are all from different places. And that's the fragments. And Kurtag is a genius, there's no question of that. And he manages in his music, you hear so many things in the voice. Now, this is not like the 8 songs where the character of George III is screaming a lot. Anna is singing very high and very low. The tessitura is very diverse. But it's a duet. In a way, it's sort of like an even more sophisticated version of 7 Deadly Sins from Kurt Weill and Bertolt Brecht, where you have Anna 1 and Anna 2. They had Anna 1 as a singer and Anna 2 as a dancer. Here we have literally Anna 1 as this woman, and the violinist is another part of her. It's very clear that
the same substance.
The violinist is somehow representing the soul of this woman who can't express everything through text, because even Kafka was obsessed with the idea that he could not articulate every human existential emotion through his writing. This was his dilemma. So what Kurtag does is, I will write the music that Kafka hears but can't express. So one car is helping the other car, so to speak.
Thank you. Donc Barrie revenait sur les Kafka fragmenteux et pour présenter l'œuvre en quelques lignes. Dans les 8 songs, on avait donc la figure du roi fou, donc Georges III d'Angleterre, qui est vraiment centrale. C'était à chaque fois des extraits de propos qu'il a vraiment tenus, qui ont été consignés par la cour qui l'entourait, que ce soit son médecin, les personnes qui le servaient au quotidien. Pour les Kafka fragmenteux, c'est plutôt, on est aussi dans une certaine forme de cycle de fragments, et les fragments ont des formes très diverses. Certains durent vraiment quelques secondes, d'autres ont des dimensions beaucoup plus grandes. On est là à partir de sortes d'aphorismes en fait de Kafka, et l'idée pour Kurtag était en quelque sorte d'exprimer ce que Kafka aurait exprimé en musique. Il y a vraiment l'un aide l'autre quelque part à exprimer la même substance. C'est une œuvre qui est très intense. Il ne faut pas forcément chercher de lien entre les différents fragments, là où on peut en voir davantage dans les 8 songs. Là, c'est vraiment chaque fragment a son individualité. On n'est pas exactement non plus dans le même registre que dans les 8 songs qui pouvaient recourir au cri, ce dont on a parlé tout à l'heure en termes de vocalité très... pas martyrisée, mais vraiment extrême. Là où dans les fragments, on est sur des registres qui sont plus chantés, qui sont là aussi assez extrêmes dans la mesure où on va vraiment chercher des couleurs très, très diverses. Mais il faut vraiment voir en quelque sorte le personnage central, qui s'appelle donc la femme, qui n'a pas de nom, comme une même substance qui se répartit entre Anna Prohaska, donc qui chante, et Patricia Kopatinskaya au violon, comme une sorte de même entité en fait qui s'exprimerait alternativement par le chant ou par le violon lorsque le chant ne peut pas supporter ce qui doit être pourtant dit. Voilà, j'espère ne pas avoir trop martyrisé cette pensée.
I just also think that what you will experience is something very unusual because it's very... Anna sings from memory. It's 1 hour of singing. Very, very complicated music. And so what she has to do musically is virtuosic. What she does scenically is virtuosic. And I don't know how she does it because she's singing perfectly, because I keep asking Patricia, is Anna singing the right notes all the time? And Patricia says, yes, she's perfect. And she has this freak quality, Anna, that she can sing the most difficult music and make it sound easy. And this is what every artist would like to do, to make something that is very difficult appear very easy or effortless. And originally I wanted Patricia to play without music, but when you hear and experience the evening, you will see it is virtually impossible for anyone to play the violin and that music from memory, even a genius like Patricia, and she is a genius, she is absolutely extraordinary. And so it's actually very nice that she has her music to refer to. But I think it's what's amazing about Kurtag, or this piece of Kurtag, is that it's so distilled. There's one soprano line, there's a Kafka text, brilliantly, all the texts are fantastic, and there is a violin, sometimes playing chords of up to 5 notes in a chord on the violin, and you feel you're listening to an orchestra. It doesn't sound like a solo violin in the end. But what Kurtag achieves with the simplicity of the music and the fragmentary nature, because sometimes it does sound like folk music, like all Hungarian music sounds like folk music, and sometimes it sounds like the most simple piece of Bach, you know. So he takes you on this sound journey, which is so... I mean, Kurtag is one of these composers. There's a handful of contemporary composers. You hear a few bars and you know it's Kurtag. And I think, like with 8 songs, in a different way, this is also a masterpiece.
Thank you. Donc l'idée était d'aborder la manière dont interprètent... dont Patricia Kopatinskaya et Anna Prohaska interprètent l'œuvre. Et voilà, c'est assez sidérant de voir que toutes deux ont une maîtrise totale de la partition. L'idée, la proposition initiale était Barrie avait demandé à Patricia de jouer par cœur, ce qui était impossible tellement la partition est affreusement difficile, même si elle la joue à la perfection. Et c'est une partition en fait qui donne parfois l'impression d'entendre un orchestre tout entier. Donc il y a un seul violon, mais l'écriture est telle que parfois vous entendrez 5 sons en même temps lors de certains accords. Et c'est la spécificité vraiment de l'écriture de Kurtag. En fait, vous entendez quelques mesures et vous savez tout de suite qu'il s'agit de cette œuvre-là.
And I just want to say also, just to interrupt, I don't think you can hear these 2 pieces sung better anywhere in the world or played. I mean, I have not heard the Kafka piece sung and played like that. And 8 songs is the best version I've ever heard because of the ensemble intercontemporain who were just simply wonderful, and Martin. So I think that there's no better. You're never going to hear it as good as Now in Aches, I believe.
I agree, yes. Et Barrie a ajouté que pour lui, il avait actuellement pas de meilleure version de ces deux œuvres. Et juste pour rebondir sur quelque chose que j'ai pas traduit tout à l'heure, les Kafka Fragmentos, c'est environ 1 heure, et c'est 1 heure qui sont portées par 2 personnes. Enfin, c'est vraiment incroyable de voir la présence scénique des 2 interprètes, et ça me permet de rebondir sur une question sur la mise en espace de ces œuvres. So these 2 works are very demanding from a physical point of view, because the 2 actors, singers are pushed to their limits.
Oh, yes, I mean, it's just they're Koskied. I mean, I haven't done it just for the. I mean, I make physical demands in all my productions, so they are merely doing what they expect.
Okay.
If I can say that.
That's okay. And maybe a few words about the because I went to many 2 rehearsals, and I was quite astonished by the evolution of the working process, because certain gestures were too physically demanding. For example, at some point for Anna, and she suggests, no, I just would like to make this fragment at this place and not this place.
But I will push the performers until they say I can't do it.
Okay.
The good ones,
Yeah.
the people I know. And that's not through sadism. That's through pushing them to see if they can go as far as they can, physically and emotionally, into something. And I'm very respectful if someone says to me, I can't do that, Barrie, or I can't breathe, in the case of Anna. But I think that that it's also my long-standing desire always to bring a little bit more arto into an opera singer's body than what we normally see on the stage.
Okay, and it also requires extreme precision from the stage management. For example, with lights, it's I was very interested by the different.
Well, we have 2 other performers who you actually don't meet. We have 2 very nice French guys up there, and they are unseen characters with the follow spots. The follow spot becomes a character in the piece, and I've been experimenting for the last 15 years with a single follow spot. I have done a number of shows in Berlin with just a bare stage and 1 light, which I enjoyed doing. And then I did a production of Salome Frankfurt in Frankfurt for the opera in Frankfurt a few years ago, where there was no set and only 1 follow spot for the whole production. And I started to experiment with the idea of what that means to light just a hand or a foot or a face. And I love it very much. The follow spot presents on a technical level a very interesting. The singer is trapped in light and has to try and get out of the light. And secondly, the follow spot is the nicest, most poetic version of a beam of moonlight that we possibly could get. It's always like the moon is lighting the stage. So yeah, I use it again on this, but it's hard to do. It takes a lot of rehearsal.
Yeah. Donc la question était de proposer de revenir sur la mise en espace de cette production qui requiert une direction d'acteur très éprouvante, et la réponse de Barrie Kosky était de dire elle est tout le temps très éprouvante parce que je cherche toujours à atteindre le meilleur des artistes, jusqu'à évidemment au point où ils me disent non, là vraiment je ne peux pas faire ça, ce qui était le cas. C'est vraiment un processus créatif qui peut-être plus que sur une autre production était vraiment se réajuster vraiment en permanence, notamment parce que dans le contexte très, très intimiste du jeu de paume, avec aussi peu d'interprètes, on peut bouger, modifier certains paramètres beaucoup plus rapidement que sur une autre production. Et la question aussi était d'évoquer donc les lumières qui jouent un grand rôle dans cette production et qui cisèlent un peu l'espace du jeu de paume. qui peuvent rappeler la lune en fait qui éclaire la scène et qui était aussi un écho à la Salomé qu'avait mise en scène également Barrie Kosky dans une mise en scène là aussi très minimaliste. Donc voilà, c'était un écho dans le rappel de ces lumières. And I will continue with the lighting. So it's very important in this production. And could you just explain in a few words your work, the lighting, this set, and you work with?
Well, yeah, I mean, we have a black space, and in this black space, the illumination is not just stage light. The illumination, as I said before, is a character, and the simplicity of it. It's like when you're in the car at night, there stops and the lights from the car light an animal on the road, just before you hit it with the car. This is the feeling that the singers have with the follow spot. It's just that moment of no escape. And this theme of no escape is very important for Kafka. Not so much for the 8 songs, but I put it into the 8 songs because 8 songs has nothing to do with Kafka. But, Kafka is my favorite writer and someone I've loved since I read The Trial as a teenager. And I've done a lot of productions using Kafka texts and exploring Kafka. And I still do. I will do another big production in Berlin next year. And one of the many themes that Kafka explores is this idea of what his fear is based on this idea that he cannot escape who he is. Mm-hmm. In Kafka's case, it's a combination of his Jewishness and a combination of his as artist. So this idea that he cannot get out of the dilemma that he knows he's in, you have to find some metaphor for that. And light becomes a very good metaphor for that. Mm-hmm. And the last thing I'll say is that, I am a director now 57 years old, so I'm sort of old school, I suppose, oldish school. And I don't see the future of theatre in technology. I respect people that use it and work with it, and I'm dazzled by technology in the theatre, but I don't think it's the future of theatre. And I would like to return a lot of times to something very, very simple and basic, because as I was talking before about the fundamental nature of opera, but I can say theatre, is this live experience that someone is doing something in front of you which could go wrong or right, mm-hmm. is never the same from night to night or day to day, and also is unique and therefore is unique to that moment. And there is something always very moving and beautiful about a performer trapped in light with darkness around them. Whether that's Marlene Dietrich or Beyonce or Anna or Martin, doesn't matter who it is, but there's always something very beautiful about it. And we are also saying, present yourself, because we are watching you, but also they want to share something with us. And I think the light becomes something to do with that. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
If you want to translate all of that.
Yeah. Donc Barrie Kosky a beaucoup évoqué la place donc, des lumières dans ses productions. C'est vraiment en fait un personnage à part entière. Il faut voir le plateau comme vraiment plongé dans l'obscurité, et les lumières ont vraiment un rôle de ciseler l'espace scénique, voire de créer une sorte de huis clos assez terrifiant pour les acteurs-chanteurs. C'est surtout le cas dans les Kafka fragmenteux, où quelque part c'est un travail qui est fait pour rendre compte du sentiment d'être pris au piège dans une identité trop plurielle pour irréconciliable, donc chez Kafka. Donc la lumière a quelque part un rôle assez violent en fait sur les acteurs-chanteurs, de les éprouver, de les enfermer, de les rendre pris au piège de cet espace. Le début des Kafka Fragmented, typiquement, a quelque chose d'assez violent, un peu comme un animal qui est pris dans les phares d'une voiture, juste avant que vous les heurtiez ou non. Là, c'est typiquement cet effet-là qui est recherché. Quelque chose de vraiment physique qui n'épargne pas les interprètes, mais qui les confronte vraiment à une certaine forme de violence. Et les lumières donc, sont réalisées par Urs Schönebaum dans cette production. And maybe for the 5 last minutes, exploring the different connections you've pointed out between the two works.
Well, I didn't explore any connections. They just happened.
You mentioned.
Yeah, but they happened by themselves. So I explored the world with Martin, and then I explored the world with Anna and Patricia, and whatever happens between those two worlds is pure accident. Because, for example, in the Peter Maxwell Davies piece, the king plays the violin at some stage. And in the Kafka, it's referred to in one piece that there are two violinists on a tram. So Anna and Patricia said, "Oh, let's have us appear together with two violins," but they didn't know about 8 songs at all. So it just shows you that it was complete by accident that this happened. And as I said, I have not attempted to make any scenic or psychological connections between the two pieces at all. In a way, they are like two planets in the same cosmos, but they are two planets. They have anything to do with each other.
Donc il faut plutôt voir les deux œuvres comme deux planètes appartenant à un même cosmos. Et les liens qui se sont faits, qui ont pu se faire entre les deux œuvres, n'étaient pas voulus. Voilà, il peut y avoir des liens, mais il n'y a pas eu de projet de créer artificiellement ou de renforcer des résonances entre les deux. Évidemment, il y a le violon qui est là dans les deux œuvres, qui joue dans les deux cas un rôle assez fort. Puisque dans les 8 songs, voilà, je ne vais pas tout vous révéler de l'histoire, mais on assiste à un épisode de folie particulièrement intense qui fait intervenir le violon. Et on commence avec les Kafka Fragmenteux, avec donc Anna et Patricia qui avancent de front ensemble, avec une identité voilà, qui se divise entre la voix chantée et le violon. Donc ça, c'était pour un des éléments les plus prégnants entre les deux œuvres. And maybe one last question about the nature of music that the two characters here in the two productions, in the same production but in the two works, because I've had the impression that it was all in Anna's head, whereas it was a mix for Martin. It's in his head, and it's also kind of extra-diegetic music. So, what is the nature of this music for you?
Well, that is your interpretation, and that's fantastic. And I'm not telling anyone what my interpretation is because the production is that. So I think the audience should make up their own mind.
Okay.
You don't have to read a program note. You don't have to know the pieces before. It's good if you can follow the subtitles because the texts are fantastic. But the interpretation of what the characters are doing and why they're doing it is entirely up to the audience, nothing to do with me.
Okay, thank you. Donc la question était de revenir sur la nature de la musique, le rapport des personnages à la musique, qu'ils entendent ou non. Ça, c'est une interprétation personnelle, hein, mais je trouve que dans les Kafka fragmenteux, on a l'impression que voilà, c'est une même substance qui se distribue, et donc la musique est celle qu'il peut y avoir dans la tête du personnage de la femme. Là où dans les 8 songs, c'est un peu plus trouble. J'ai l'impression qu'on oscille entre de la musique qui... On est dans la tête du roi fou, mais à certains moments donnés, on a l'impression de le voir réagir aussi à cette musique, comme si cette musique était dans sa tête, mais aussi à l'extérieur. Voilà, il y a pour moi des chansons qui sont, alors si on veut utiliser les mots savants, plutôt intradiégétiques dans sa tête, plutôt extradiégétiques, il réagit à ce qu'il entend. Et la réponse de Barrie Kosky, voilà, comment est-ce que vous l'interprétez, je pense que c'est très libre. Justement, il ne faut pas... à poser de cadres qui soient trop rigides pour le public. C'est de son point de vue, pas un choix qu'il a fait pour le public. Donc voilà, c'est vraiment quelque chose qui appartient aux spectateurs qui voient cette production. Est-ce qu'il y a des questions dans le public? Je pense qu'on a le temps encore pour une ou deux questions. Un micro peut circuler dans la cour.
No one's seen the show, so they have nothing to say. They have to come and see the show.
No, it's more of a mundane question, unfortunately. Because all after those big productions you've done, Cozy, Triptych, to big operas, how does it feel just to come to this exile into south of France, away from big houses where you have to make, so to say, blood of season creation, and to think of something really chamber? How do you perceive this change of scale between the works and themes?
It's like the most wonderful release and relief. I do a lot of very big productions, as you were saying, and involving choruses and dancers and actors. And, I love the apparatus of opera. I love it. And I've been doing it for 35 years. But every so often, and I do it every 2 years or so, I have to give myself these little wonderful projects. I did Pierre Lunaire in Berlin a few years ago. And I did another Kurt Weill Bertolt Brecht piece a few years ago in Berlin. And every so often, it's a joy to wake up in the morning and go into a rehearsal room where there's not 200 people in the room, but there's one person. And it's probably more scary for the performer than it is for me, because they're alone, but quite liberated. But for me, it's pure joy. But I only do these projects with performers I know, who are colleagues and friends, and the trust is so strong that you can be with them for 6 hours a day doing this. But it's pure joy and release, and you can spend a lot of time on very small details, and worry about this. But of course, for them, it's the same emotional journey as they would if they were in a big production. But for me, it's like a spa hotel, of the soul. My soul feels massaged. Also, it's very nice to be here in Aix. This is a spectacular city. I love it. And the festival is always wonderful. So it's also a double thing.
La question, si je résume, c'était comment est-ce qu'on gère justement le changement d'échelle entre des énormes productions et ce genre de travail beaucoup plus intimiste. Et la réponse était de dire que c'était vraiment un bonheur d'arriver dans une salle de répétition où en fait il n'y a qu'une seule personne et pas 200 qui vous attendent, et que quelque part, oui, il y a quelque chose d'une ascèse. On a parlé d'une ascèse, d'une détox tout à l'heure. Oui, voilà, et d'un spa, ça fait l'effet d'un massage, voilà, de travailler dans ces conditions, de changer d'échelle de manière aussi drastique. Et une autre question?
Thank you. This is a sort of the opposite question, if you like. 8 songs are, to me, some of the most extroverted and intense experience, and the Kafka are equally intense, so it's almost like serving 2 very, very dense steak dishes next to each other. I can't wait to see it, but I would love to hear your approach on how these come together.
It's very interesting. I always use food metaphors in my rehearsals, and I've always referred to each production as a particular type of food or alcohol or something. So I always start saying to people in the singer, sometimes it's much easier to say to a singer, to say I need it to smell like this, or I need it to feel like this, or it needs to be like this form of alcohol. And a good singer will go, oh, I know exactly what you mean. And I use that often. But I would never, in a million years, describe the 2 pieces as steak dinners. It's very interesting that you have. I wouldn't describe them as steak dinners. I would either describe them as, well, I think it's like a sort of nutty, 2 sort of nuts that are sort of, there's no caramel there. There's a salty nut There's a sort of macadamia, walnut, almond thing happening. But I don't think it's meat. And I think that, but I'm very happy with your steak. And if you want to go and see the show and still think it's steak, that's fantastic. But it's intense. But I tell you something, even though the music is extreme, and even though the music is virtuose, and the music is not initially, it's not Gluck, it's not Puccini, you know, don't come along if you don't know this music thinking that you're going to get an hour and a half of happiness, happy tunes. It's not that at all. And the subject matter is very intense. But through what Peter Maxwell does with the music, Maxwell Davis does with the music, and what Kurtag does with the music, I think they are very transparent. I think they fly, these pieces. I mean, the first piece is about, he talks to the birds in the piece. And for me, the music and his voice, they fly. And the Kafka fragments, she's flying through this. She's not on the ground. So it doesn't feel heavy at all. It's an intense experience, but they are not grounded in the earth. They're flying, which makes it lighter. So that you have that for me is the feeling of it. But if it is a steak, it's very rare. It's not well done. There's blood on it.
Donc la question était de revenir sur les deux régimes d'intensité qu'on a entre ces deux œuvres. Et Barrie Kosky répondait en disant qu'il avait l'habitude de, surtout pour les actrices, les interprètes, de parler en termes de métaphores culinaires pour leur permettre de trouver directement la bonne sensation dans l'interprétation. Que typiquement, c'était quelque chose d'assez difficile pour ces deux œuvres, qu'on n'était absolument pas dans un registre carné, enfin que ça lui viendrait absolument pas à l'esprit de comparer ça à un steak, par exemple, mais qu'on était beaucoup plus sur le régime des fruits secs, des amandes, en particulier que ça pourrait être une noix de macadamia salée, par exemple, pour ou des noix. La suite était que, par contre, dans les deux œuvres, les interprètes sont sont en quelque sorte en lévitation. Il y a une sorte de paradoxe entre l'extrême densité et néanmoins la légèreté. C'est difficile à expliquer parce que j'ai vraiment l'impression de concilier les contraires en permanence. Je pense que ce sera beaucoup plus clair quand vous aurez vu l'œuvre, mais on est vraiment sur une densité, une quintessence des sentiments, des propos qui sont tenus dans les deux œuvres, et en même temps quelque chose qui est très, très léger, très, très fluide, très ductile aussi dans le registre musical et dans la partition. Voilà. Merci à toutes et à tous pour votre présence. Merci Barrie Kosky aussi.
Merci bien.
Et donc on vous donne rendez-vous pour le prochain midi, donc pour la pluridisciplinarité le 8 prochain. Et le prochain tête-à-tête c'est demain et ça sera avec William Kentridge. Voilà, je vous souhaite à toutes et à tous une très bonne soirée.